Over the years, I've had the same questions from singers, teachers and parents. Do we need exams in singing? I've had my own thoughts, but today I got the real answers from the one and only Louise Horrocks from Trinity College, London. Let's go. So here we are this morning, Louise, with this wonderful view behind us, the London Eye, and we're here to talk about exams.
That's right.
Which is, I guess some people may not say it's the most thrilling topic to talk about, but this is your world, right?
This is my world, indeed, it is, yeah. Well, Trinity College London runs music exams in a wide range of instruments, from very early stages of development right through to our highest qualification, which is the Fellowship of Trinity College London, which is a diploma. And as I say, it covers a lot of instruments, including singing. We also operate in over 60 countries worldwide, but we don't just do music. We do language exams, drama exams, speech exams, and some dance as well. So it's a very broad examination boards, really, for performing arts across all subjects.
Awesome. So to dial it down to my subject,
yes.
which is singing,
yes.
And your subject.
And my subject too, yes, indeed, that's right.
I always wonder every time when something as big as this is created, how did it begin?
Well, it began over a century ago, of course, and it was designed, the very original exams were designed as a ladder to get people up to conservatory level of singing or in any other instrument before they actually then entered the conservatories. But of course that's changed radically. And I now like to think that Trinity represents what we call the 21st century singer. And we're very aware that there's those very single line paths, you set off very, very young, I'm going to be a classical singer, or I'm going to be a jazz singer. They've got much more sort of melded together, and youngsters, adults want to try different genres, they want to try different ways of singing, they want to experiment, explore. And so I would say now that we've got a really wide range of exams that suit certainly everybody. The classical syllabuses have some folk singing in them. We've got jazz in there, we've got our rock and pop syllabuses, which cater much more obviously for those who want to do rock and pop. We have certificate exams for people who don't want to do supporting tests. So really anyone can come in at any level in any sort of different style or genre. So that's where we've evolved to.
Right.
From what was, I think, quite a strict and very rigid path way back when.
Yeah, and I guess you'd almost say that the contemporary side of music has come in a little later than when it first began, yes, and so that's evolved more so in the past few years.
More so. Our rock and pop syllabus is still very, very young. We've only been up and running for about 4 or 5 years, and that was in relation to the market saying we feel that there should be more provision for musicians and singers who perhaps don't have what we might have viewed as the traditional route in, where they have a one-on-one lesson every week or any of those sorts of things. A lot of self-taught musicians so that they can access our syllabuses in a different way. So yes, that is definitely a more modern development.
Yeah. And in terms of the contemporary, what's the main outline? In fact, the main outline for any of your syllabuses, what does it include? What are those parameters you talk about?
Okay, well, in the actual syllabuses, we have rock and pop is slightly different from our classical and jazz, but the main aim of all of our syllabus is to get the musicians performing, and performing in a way that we try to relate to what actually happens out in the real world. So for rock and pop musicians, they have to play or sing 3 songs, and we try and choose them from contemporary music, music of the last, say, 25 years, perhaps a little bit sooner, but lots of songs that they will know, that they will have heard, they will relate to. And then they have what they call a session skill, and the session skill is either improvising or playback. And again, trying to reflect what actually really happens. You go with your song sheet, and you might be in a band, and they might say, right, well, you need to improvise around this, or you might have to play something back that you've never heard before, or sing something back. So trying to reflect what really happens in the contemporary music scene. Classical and jazz slightly more different because it relates more to other instruments, perhaps. So the singers still have a real focus on performing, singing those songs, getting out there. They have to do a little bit of technical work where they have choices of how they interpret that, and then they do supporting skills, which are things like improvisation or oral tests, sight reading, musical knowledge, those sorts of things.
Well, yeah, so there's a whole host of things there, and that was going to be my
thing.
The next question was going to be, for those parents normally who say, does my child need to take exams? Why do they have to take exams? You kind of answered it there, and for you guys it seems like it's reverse engineered to, well, one day they're going to be performing, So they need the skills to perform, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but so we're using these guidelines to as a measurement and a milestone for achievement to enable that.
That's exactly
deliver that
it.
goal?
That's exactly it. But we like to think that our exams go beyond just those who perhaps will end up in the profession, because a lot of singers, may not necessarily go all the way through to the profession, but it's giving them enhanced life skills as well, the ability to study, to memorise perhaps, or to develop oral skills, to develop listening skills, to develop performing skills actually, so that they can relate those. Obviously my path was I did go through to train as a singer, but I'm looking back to when I did exams thinking, well, actually it was very useful for me for presenting myself and knowing how to actually deliver something as a snapshot then and there, which is a tremendously useful life skill and actually not perhaps tested so much in academic exams anymore.
Absolutely, yeah.
But yes, certainly for people who want to go on and do it, we're giving them the skills that will equip them to do that and to take their music. It may be that they end up being a listener to music. They may not necessarily perform, but we're hoping that the skills they've learned en route will make them a more acute listener, and they'll understand and they'll be more aware of what they're listening to, for example. So audience members, or perhaps people who go on to compose or write, if they've followed a singing route through and they've learned all those singing skills, they think, I know now how I can write for a singer, because I know what a singer could achieve at this sort of level or might achieve if they got to that level. So we hope that it broadens people's perspectives wider than just simply performing as well.
And all of those factors are taken into account whenever you're writing any of your syllabuses or developing, yeah?
Absolutely.
As many as possible, I guess.
As many as possible,
yeah.
Yes. We really want our syllabuses to try and reflect both what's happening in the performing world, but also what teachers are actually teaching and the skills that they are actually engaging with their students. And there's been so much development in that, for example, in the field of improvisation. And so we wanted to include that as something that a candidate could come in. If they're a great improviser, why not give them the opportunity in an exam to come in and prove that they can improvise and get rewarded for that? So it's always about looking at playing to a candidate's strengths and encouraging their development in areas that they feel comfortable and happy with and confident with, so that they don't have to necessarily, it's certainly not one size fits all. Right. We don't expect someone to go this and this in an exam. They might do, well, I'll choose that song, but I might choose this supporting test, or I might do that technical work, and I'm a brilliant improviser, so I'll finish with improvisation.
I was going to say, because you're answering questions before I ask them.
I'm sorry.
I'm kidding. Because singing a music to some extent is subjective.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And I guess it's always been a bit of a challenge in terms of exams.
Yes.
So how do you approach that? How do you approach the fact that a lot of people would possibly say that, I'm not an artist, especially in the rock and pop world.
Yes.
I'm an artist.
Yes.
This is my thing.
Yes.
This is my style. Get over
Yes.
it. Even though I'm going to fail your test, right?
Yes.
What do you?
Well, one of the things that we have on our rock and pop syllabus is for song 2, they can do an own choice song.
Right.
And that can be their own choice from any genre that they want. It can be their own composition. They can do a song where they can accompany themselves if they want to, so that we're giving people the opportunity to be artistic and creative, but still have an assessment. And as you said about the benchmark, the sense of achievement, if someone says, well, I've got grade 5 vocals, rock and pop, people know what that is. They know that there's a sort of sense that means, well, that's what we expect you to be able to do.
Right.
And so they can relate to other people that have got that level. They can, it can be useful for taking them forward to something different. So I agree, it is a subjective thing, and that's where examiner training comes in, of course.
Right. And do you mentioned about the grades there. So, and there's many grading schemes?
Our basic grade scheme runs from initial to grade 8.
Okay.
And initial is the very first, it's a sort of pre-grade exam. It's still assessed in the same way, but it's giving someone an opportunity to, right at the beginning level. And then it steps up through grade 1 to grade 8, getting increasingly harder with more demands. For vocalists, it might include greater ranges of notation. It might also include more emotional content. The higher the grade, we might expect a much more in-depth approach to a song, for example. And it also is going to include different techniques as well as they get higher through the grades.
Right, and I think that maybe is where you've got your grading scheme there, and it seems very, very progressive, which is brilliant. But I guess there are outside of Trinity, there'll be other examining boards that have got their own scheme.
Yes.
Right, and I'm just trying to figure in my head on the spot why. Because you could ask a singer, you could say, or they could say, I've got a grade 8 in singing. Unless you're involved in that one particular exam or examining board, you're really going to struggle to know what does that even mean. I get that you're going to have some knowledge and experience in singing, but what does it mean? But I'm guessing for you guys, it's actually more about the journey that they've been through, and it's not necessarily about I've got this grade and that means I can do something. It's actually they've learned through that process, right?
Absolutely. Though interestingly, anyone can come in at any grade. So you don't have to do initial 1, 2, 3. So, for example, I mean, when I've been teaching singers, I might have a singer who comes to me who's already quite advanced, perhaps a natural singer. We've all met them, where they just can do it.
They can just do it. Yeah.
So they don't have to go right the way back. They can go in at a grade that's appropriate to them. You might also find that you perhaps take on an adult student, and you perhaps wouldn't start them way back because their voices are already quite mature, so they're ready to move into a higher grade.
Right.
But interestingly, we and the other major boards, we're all accredited, and our standards have to be similar across our grade levels. So for grades 6, 7 and 8, we and the other boards, they can attract UCAS points to help them with their university applications, and we're all accredited at the same level. So even though we might say we've got to grade 6 via this route, and another board might say we've got to grade 6 via this route, the outcomes
that makes so much sense.
Are the same, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, and within those parameters, there's one that's always kicking around the rock and pop world,
right?
And I guess it's a passion of mine, and it's the fact that here's an example of a situation. A young singer walks into a studio and says, I've passed grade 8 in whatever board, and again, it's a little bit unclear about what that means, but it means that obviously there's some experience. And more often than not, in experience, when walking into the rock and pop world, when that strong upper register, the sound that's required for that in musical theatre, could even go onto a belt, those kind of things in some areas haven't been addressed.
Right.
And then they've got this whole next journey of, okay, now I need to really figure out how to almost train the instrument as opposed to the art.
Yes.
So does Trinity address that, or?
Well, it tries to address it two ways, and one is in the actual choice of material, and obviously what you're describing is quite an advanced technique, so it won't come in until the higher grades anyway, but there will be songs on the syllabuses, both classical and jazz, because obviously register integration, slightly different for classical singers, but the same sort of thing, and belt for musical theatre, and also the mix that you might meet, say, in the rock and pop world. We do choose songs that would address that, but we also train our examiners so that they know what they're listening for, and that someone who is achieving that will be rewarded, and someone who is not will not perhaps score as highly in those areas, and it will be pointed out on the report form, because all candidates get a written report form, which is that snapshot of this is what you did on the day, and this is what we noticed, this is what happened. It's never sort of we try to be as objective as possible, and there are criteria that are very strict, and an examiner will say, well, that's what I heard, that's what the criteria says for that mark, so that's the mark that it matches. And then they will write comments to say, this happened, this didn't happen.
Areas to work on, acknowledging that kind of thing.
Yes,
yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Oh, wonderful, yeah. That's music to my ears. So do you know if there's big differences between what you do and what other examining boards, despite the fact that you've got this you need to hit the
sort of parity? Yes, yes. Yes, I think certainly we differ from Rock School. We certainly differ from the associated board, and I very much say that it's people choosing a path through. I think what Trinity do particularly well is we give them so many options, because not only can you do the sort of classical and jazz, as I've said, you can do the rock and pop. If you're a particular musical theatre person, we have the suite of musical theatre exams as well, and people can sort of find a route, and then within that route there are then further choices. So I think we would say that we give candidates really the absolute maximum opportunity to show what they can do. So yes, I think we are different from other boards, but as you say, there is that parity across.
And in terms of jobs that a young singer may fit, I know this is a really tricky question, it's so vast, but just to give a bit of guidance, what kind of roles and jobs could young singers walk into after they leave the the education of Trinity?
Well, it depends what level they're leaving at, because I would say that grade 8 is a huge achievement. Anyone who's got a grade 8, fantastic. But it really is only the beginning, because then you would start to go on to your diplomas, and diplomas are mapping much more into higher education then. And so it's sort of the equivalent, I suppose, if you've got grade 8, you've perhaps got the equivalent of something at A-level standard. So you may be thinking, no, actually I need to train further before I can really consider something perhaps in the profession.
Sure.
So that's maybe when the diploma exams come in and you actually take that to the next level.
The journey would continue from there.
Yes,
Right,
absolutely.
Right. Awesome. So do you still sing?
I do a bit, yes.
you?
I don't sing nearly as much as I used to. Pretty much retired from that now.
Oh,
Moved
really?
into other areas, but yes, no, I do still.
And what was your field?
I was classically trained,
Right.
so I'm very much on that side. But like perhaps a lot of youngsters when I was at school, did some singing in front of a band, so I have a bit of that background as well. So fairly eclectic, I would say. But,
Nice.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple of questions in a quick fire type fashion, if
Okay.
you would. Now it's just I'm going to say one or two words, and I
Right.
just like to do this with just everyone because I just like to see the response.
Okay.
So what do you say? What comes to mind? And it can be anything, whether that's a person, an object, an animal, whatever.
Yep.
When you hear the word happiness.
Travel.
Interesting. So have you travelled much?
I have travelled a lot and travelled a lot for Trinity, and that's another thing that I think is a great bonus to us, is because we work in so many different countries, we're always open to teachers in the local communities saying, why haven't you considered putting this on the syllabus, or have you come across this composer? And that's fantastic, because I think it broadens what we offer even more, so that there's always different composers on the syllabuses. So yes, so happiness and travel.
Lovely.
Yes, I think so.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I'm into that as well. I love travelling. Lastly, what do you think, or what comes to mind when you hear the word success?
Oh, I should have answered straight away. I'm thinking about it.
That's
now.
all right.
I think success is being true to yourself. I don't think it's necessarily about, the biggest car, the biggest salary, I think it's about finding what makes you happy and what keeps your integrity. And I think if you can truly discover that, then you are successful. And everything else stems from that, I think.
Well, that's an absolutely beautiful way to end any interview. And we'll end this one here.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise. It's amazing.
Great. Thank you.